In today's video, we're going to continue our 2019 NHL offseason plan series, and we're discussing the Los Angeles Kings, and that's coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So welcome back to the 2019 NHL offseason plan series. If you're new to this series and there's plenty of other teams that you've missed, I'm going to put a link to the YouTube playlist up here in the cards where you can go ahead and take a look at the other teams as well that we've already covered. If there's a team you're looking for that's not there as of yet, stay patient and stay tuned here. Many of those teams will be covered shortly over the coming days to try to wrap this series up. Also, if you're new to this series, we break this down into 3 segments. Segment 1, we do a season recap for 18-19, take a look at any important team or individual player stats, as well as any significant changes that happen throughout the year. Secondly, we're going to take a look at the salary cap situation, analyze any RFA or UFA contracts that they may have to handle this summer as well. Thirdly, we're going to discuss how does this team move forward and what moves they need to make over the summer to get better for next year. Now let's jump on here and take a look at the 18-19 season recap for the LA Kings. Now obviously, as many of you I'm sure know, the LA Kings did not have a very solid 18-19 season. Things did not go well at all. Things went off the rails early and never got back on track. I think the Kings went into training camp thinking they were a much stronger team than what they turned out to be. They finished with a record of 31-42-9 for 8th place in the Pacific Division, near the bottom of the league, 71 points overall. Not a great season, but I guess one good thing that came from it is that they'll have the number 5 overall draft pick in the 2019 NHL Draft this summer, which we will discuss here a little bit later in this video. They could have had better luck though with the draft lottery, but still picking number 5 is pretty solid overall. Taking a look at some of the key team stats here, let's look at special teams and the goals for and against. Power play was not great at all, 15.8%, 27th best. Penalty killing was not any better, 76.5 for 29th best. Special teams were not good at all. In both areas need to be worked on here. Goals for were terrible, 202 goals for 30th best. This team really struggled big time to score last year. Meanwhile, they allowed 263 goals against for 22nd best. So out of all these, that's the highest ranking one, which I guess isn't as terrible as some might seem. But overall, not a good year for the LA Kings at all. Now let's take a look at some of their key individual stats, including their goaltending as well as the top scorers. Now Jonathan Quick remained the starter for the LA Kings this past year, but he was out again for a period of time due to injury. So we did see extended playing time here for guys like Campbell and Peterson. But Quick did go with a record here of 16, 23, and 7 with an .888 save percentage and 3.38 goals against. Now not good, although you can't really put all that on him. The team in front of him defensively was not very strong, but at the same time, you do expect a little bit better here from Jonathan Quick, who's got quite an extended resume of a lot of success and Stanley Cups to his name. So it's unfortunate to see here, but Quick has also had a lot of issues with his health over the last few years, missed a fair bit of time, and there's certainly a lot of question marks around his future with this team as well. Taking a look at some of their top point producers, even though these guys have been point producers in the past, they certainly all had down years for the most part. Anze Kopitar led the way with 60 points, which was a big drop from the year before. Dustin Brown had 51, who also had a down year compared to the year before. Drew Doughty had 45 points. Again, there's a pattern here. That's a down year for him. We saw Ilya Kovalchuk and Tyler Toffoli both tied with 34 points, and I think we both expected more out of those guys as well. Now let's take a look at some of the key changes and trades that happened to the team throughout the year. There certainly were quite a few. The things got off to a poor start, and one of the first things that this team did was fire head coach John Stevens. He didn't last too long into the year. Unfortunately, things just got off to a bad start, and not quite often is the case, but many expected Stevens to be on hot water here after a shaky start. They did bring in Willie Desjardins as an interim coach. And I must say that was not a good idea. As much as Willie Desjardins has had success at the junior level before in the WHL, we saw him coach the Vancouver Canucks before. Didn't do too badly there, but this was not a recipe for success at all. A lot of the information out of the LA Kings organization and people who watch this team closely, especially at practices and stuff, really indicated that practices were not run well. Players were not happy. It just seems like Willie Desjardins didn't get a whole lot of respect from the players, and it just did not go well at all. Bringing him in as an interim coach turned out to really be a bad idea, but unfortunately you live and learn. But he won't be back now. They've hired Todd McLellan to be the new head coach. So obviously there is a connection there between McLellan and general manager Rob Blake. Of course, Blake ended his career playing for the Sharks where McClellan was coaching at the time, so they know each other quite well. And then, of course, Blake knows what he's like firsthand as a coach, where he played for him directly. So we'll see how he can do. Obviously, his last stint with the Oilers didn't go overly well, but I think there's so many issues there. You certainly can't put all that on him. But he does have quite an extended resume, having a lot of success previously with the Sharks as a head coach. And, of course, before that, he was an assistant coach under Mike Babcock as well. So he does have a pretty good resume. We'll see what he can do in LA. Not sure he was the best available out there based on his recent performance with the Oilers, but at the same time, obviously they wanted somebody with experience, and McClellan turned out to be their guy. Now, throughout the year, they made some trades as well. Obviously, they traded defenseman Jake Muzzin to the Leafs in exchange for Carl Grundstrom, Sean Dursey, and a first-round pick. So, obviously, that was a pretty good return for Muzzin, I must say. Based on his play with the Leafs, I certainly think it's fair to say that the Leafs paid quite a bit to bring Muzzin in. We saw them trade Tanner Pearson to Pittsburgh in exchange for Carl Hagelin. Now, both of those players were looking for a fresh start. Both of those guys were struggling, and neither one of them stayed with those teams. We saw Pearson end up being traded by Pittsburgh over to Vancouver later on, and then Hagelin went from the Kings over to the Capitals in exchange for a couple of picks near the deadline. And of course, they also traded veteran center Nate Thompson to Montreal later into the year as well. So starting to move out some players that they were ready to move on from, but there's certainly a lot of bigger contracts on this team. They're still problematic, but I guess they can do what they can do here, and it was a start to get things going towards basically a retool. Now let's take a look at the second segment where we analyze their cap situation, look at any contracts that are expiring this coming year. Now, right now, the LA Kings do not have any pending unrestricted free agents, so they don't have anybody that's a UFA that they need to decide to bring back or not. They do have some of these RFAs that they likely do want to bring back. I would think they have forwards Brendan Leipsic, Iafallo, as well as Kempe, and then defenseman Matt Roy. Pretty good chance, I think, that they all at least get qualified in return on a short-term basis. Hard to say how long-term any of them go, but I do see them at least remaining with the organization. Currently, right now, next year for the salary cap, the Kings have 19 NHL contracts in place for a grand total of $71.2 million, leaving them $11.7 million in salary cap space. Now, let's take a look here. What does this team need to do to get better for next year? Well, for starters, they need Jonathan Quick to be healthy, or they need to consider trading him, which I know they can't predict his health. However, they do have two other capable goalies, and they proved that this past year between Campbell and Peterson. Personally, if I were the LA Kings, I would try to trade Jonathan Quick. Now, he still has a fair bit of term on his contract. He has certainly had his fair share of injuries and health problems over the last few years as well. That's not going to help his case. They might have to retain some salary. I'm not sure how they go about this. But personally, if I were LA, I'd be ready to move on from him. I think the other two goalies are fully capable, and I would certainly free up some cap space as well and give those younger guys a chance to play. I know that's not going to be easy, but I would certainly consider making that move if I'm them. Obviously, they have a very high pick coming up at the 2019 NHL Draft. They have the 5th overall selection, so they certainly are going to have their opportunity to grab a pretty solid player. I mean, they have the polarizing figure of Vasily Podkolzin they could consider taking, who likely won't come over and play for a year or two. I'm not sure the Kings really can wait here. They may not go down that road because they might not want to be patient enough with the young Russian player, but there's certainly plenty of other guys, maybe a Dylan Cousins, maybe a Kirby Dach, maybe Alex Turcotte slips a little bit. He's expected to go at 3 or 4, so that's a possibility too. Of course, there's always Trevor Zegras, even Cole Caulfield, the amazing goal scorer who's from the U.S. national team. He's been tremendous all year, been breaking records, playing a lot with Jack Hughes. I fully suspect Caulfield to go in the top 10 and likely would be available to number 5 spot should LA decide to go down that road. But either way, they're getting themselves a pretty solid prospect as long as they go about things the proper way here. So I do expect that will help here, but probably not for the coming year. That's probably a year or two away from really having much impact on the team at the NHL level at least. And we heard rumblings here not too long ago that they might be looking to talk to the Toronto Maple Leafs about bringing in Patrick Marleau, which was kind of surprising. I mean, there was some talk that Marleau might waive to go back and play for his old coach, Todd McClellan. It seems surprising why he'd leave Toronto. I know that the Leafs would probably love to move his contract to free up the space to sign a lot of their younger players, but there was some talk from Pierre LeBrun that they might have been talking to the Kings about this, which would seem quite surprising. I don't really think they need another older, aging veteran contract. Mind you, it is only 1 year left, so it wouldn't be long term, and they might be able to get themselves another asset out of Toronto to kind of sweeten things up here to make it worth their while. So I guess it's always a possibility. One other thing that I put down here that I thought the Kings should consider was moving on from Dion Phaneuf if at all possible. I mean, either buying him out, retaining some salary, doing something. He's turned out to be not a great fit there. He's really fallen out of favor. Ended up being a healthy scratch a few times last year too. So if they can move on from Dion, that would be fantastic. I know we just did a video talking about some of the moves that the Leafs might make in the last day or so here, and I did make a joke saying maybe the LA would be able to trade Dion back to Toronto at a reduced rate here. Ottawa's already retained part of his salary in the trade to LA. If LA retained a little bit more, would Toronto take him back at like a $3 million cap hit? Hard to say. I'm not sure that that's a really possibility. Probably about 3.5, I think, is the lowest they could go. But either way, they need to find a way to move on from Dion, if at all possible. I really doubt Toronto will take him back. That's more of a joke than anything else. But either way, I guess crazier things have happened, though. If they can find a way to move on from Phaneuf, that would also go a long way to help another player play in the blue line and free up some cap space here along the way, too. In my opinion as well, they also need to make a long-term decision on forward Tyler Toffoli. I mean, Toffoli's had a pretty solid start to his time in LA, but it has been down with his numbers as of late. Do they sign him and extend him longer term and make him part of the solution in LA? Or do they trade him because he's down to 1 year left on his contract? They really need to make a decision and either extend him or trade him, in my opinion. If they're going to extend him, get it done now while the numbers are still lower. Take advantage of that so they can maybe get a better cap hit. Or if you're going to trade him now to get him a fresh start and get some other players back in your team here so they can start working on moving on to the next step. Of course, they do have some pending unrestricted free agent forwards and veterans Trevor Lewis and Kyle Clifford. They're going into their last year of their deal. They don't really need to make much of a decision there. They could take advantage of having them on their team as veterans for the year, and maybe they could be trade deadline acquisitions for other teams to help another team down the stretch here. But I don't see them fitting here longer term. They've been great soldiers for LA. They've certainly been, important pieces to some of their past cup runs and past success. But I do think it's time to move on and get some younger players in there who can maybe bring a different style of game to the team. So those are all my thoughts and ideas for plans that the Kings should look at over the summer. I'd love to hear what yours are as well. What moves do you think are most important that the LA Kings take a look at this summer to make this team better moving forward? If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, subscribe for more videos in this series. There's still a few more left, so stay tuned for that. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.